What else would you name him, right? He heard the humble prayers of this woman. And out of that comes probably, without a doubt, one of the greatest prophets that ever lived, Samuel. And for Samuel, it's an uphill battle. It starts with, like the song that we just sang says, this marvelous story of Samuel's calling. Still as a young man, he is lying in bed, and all of a sudden, in the middle of the night, he hears this voice calling him, Samuel, Samuel. He wakes up, kind of like we probably would do. Looks around, there's nobody there. Figures it has to be Eli. So he goes in and he talks to Eli and says, yes, sir, what did you need? I didn't call you, go back to bed. Which he does. And that happens 3 different times. And finally, Eli, the high priest, catches on and he says, I know what this is. This is God speaking. He says, now, next time, when you hear that voice, I want you to answer that voice and say, Lord, here I am. Lead me. And he does. And that begins this marvelous journey for Samuel, an entire lifetime of following God. Now, I'd love to tell you that everything works out just great for Samuel's family. It actually doesn't. Samuel's sons weren't any better than Eli's sons. It seemed to be a cultural contamination. And it seemed to spill over even into the most righteous of families. But Samuel remains a constant. Well, let's skip ahead a little bit. First of all, we need a good working definition for sin, because there's a lot of that appears in this story. I looked up in Holman's Bible Dictionary, sin, which is defined by humans' rebellion against God and surrendering the power of evil to evil rather than to God. So it's giving into evil instead of giving into God. Okay? It goes on to say that sin is willfully doing what God has forbidden, or it is willfully not doing what God has commanded. Either side. So either you're doing what God says don't do, or you're not doing what he's told you to go and do. That's sin. So even though the thing, theoretically, might be a good thing, if it's not what God has told you to do, it's sin. If God has said, Christina, I want you to go and I want you to do thus and so, and you say, no, not really. She goes off and she does other good things. That's still sin, because it's disobedience, isn't it? Or if Julie says, now, I'm just going to do whatever I want to do, and I'm not going to regard God at all, that too is sin. So sin can be either way. And we're going to find that there's experience in both of those throughout this story. Now, one of the people that comes into play is a man by the name of Saul. Saul is the other major character in the reading of this chapter. Saul is the very first king that Israel has. It says that he is a good foot taller than every other man in the army of Israel. Okay, so I want you to picture this. Saul is this tall warrior, good-looking. He is a champion of the people, well-liked, well-respected, bigger, stronger than anyone else. And this is who is appointed king. Now, does that sound like God's usual pattern? No, not really. God's usual pattern is people like David. Okay? Little guys. People like Elijah or Elisha, or Abraham. People like, well, the list could go on. But not Saul. So what's the deal with that? Well, Israel had always been set up with the notion that who was their king? God was their king. That's right. What a marvelous relationship. This is the shortest democracy in the history of the world. People, God. People, leader. People, king. Direct access. There's no intermediaries. There's none of this bureaucracy that goes on in the middle. And that's how God wanted it, wasn't it? He wanted to answer all of their needs, all of their questions, all of their desires firsthand. But the people kept messing it up. And so the people, seeing that things aren't working well around them, of course, naturally, jump to the conclusion that it's whose fault? God's. It couldn't be my fault. Wouldn't have been anything that I did. It must be God's fault. This whole king God is not working for us. Give us a real king. Now, Samuel takes offense at that. Gee, I wonder why. I would imagine Samuel's also taking a little offense at the fact that they came to Samuel and said, you know, your sons just aren't working out. This retirement plan that you had, see, and by this time, Samuel's retired. He's turned the family business, judge prophets, over to his sons, who seem to go off on their own, really don't have the leadership capabilities, just aren't following God's plan. And the people say, you know, all of this isn't working out so well. How about you let us choose? Can't go any worse, right? And God, you would think, would come down and say, all right, stop. That's not going to happen. That's not part of my plan. That's not where I'm leading you. But you see, that's the difference between this top story and this bottom story. The top story becomes unchangeable. It's God's story. It's his plan of gaining us back through relationship, of giving us the kinds of relationships that we need with him in order to be able to restore this kingdom grace. All of the stuff at the bottom, though, is negotiable. All the stuff at the bottom can change. God says, all right, that's what you want? Give it a try. Ever done that with your kids? They're on you and on you and on you and on you and on you about something, and finally says, fine, go ahead and try that. And you kind of stand real close so that when things fail, because it's not a matter of if they'll fail, it's just a matter of when. You stand real close so that when they fail, you can be there to help pick them up. I have a feeling that that was where God was. Just like he is in our lives all of the time, we go off on our own. We want things different. We get impatient. And there's God off to the side saying, well, go ahead, give it a try. And we go. And God goes with us. Kind of scooches over next. He wants us to experience what's going to happen, but he doesn't want us to get so discouraged that we give up. So it was with the people of Israel. He gave in to their desires. He says, fine, if a king is what you want, then a king is what you shall have. And Samuel, by the way, don't take this personally. They're not rebelling against you, they're rebelling against me. So he quiets Samuel a little bit. They, with all of the wisdom that the people had, appoint Saul king. This good-looking, strapping warrior, head taller, foot taller than everyone else. They make him king. Why not? He's the best warrior they've got. There's only one problem with all of this. Samuel, who is now God's anointed king. Now remember, keep that straight. It's not God's will that Saul be king. It's just God letting the people have what they want. And so Saul is the one that's appointed. Okay? There's only one problem. This man that is chosen, this man that has God's blessing, this man that now the power of God is falling upon him, seems to still want to do things his way.